Hi there, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to my space. So far, we've been able to get drums recorded, which is, a colossal achievement, and we've been able to get guitars done. So we can sigh a big sigh of relief. You've done your first couple of tracks on the Zoom, and you're ready to go in and record bass, or, if you have keyboards, you might want to do those too. But we're going to just talk about the bass guitar. And so bass guitar to me is kind of a relief by the time I get to this point, because lately I've been plugging directly into the Zoom and using the modeling. And the modeling that I chose was the one called Tube Pre. And that effect gives me kind of like this nice plunky tone. I was sort of going for a flat kind of plunky tone on the bass, sort of similar to what Geezer Butler achieved on the first couple of Black Sabbath records. The bass tone on those records really stood out to me, and I don't think I really got there, but I at least got in that direction as far as like how the bass sounds. Now, what I usually do with bass is I plug in directly, and I'll pick out a bass setting, and then I'll get the signal as hot as I can. And what we're going to do, when we do these direct plugins, is we plug in directly to the channel with the high Z input on, coming right out of that Northeast cable. Because like I said earlier, one of the cool things about the Zoom is that these inputs have the jacks can do multiple inputs. You can do TRS, you can do the jacks, your guitar, your quarter-inch jacks from your guitar, instrument cables, speaker cables, and then of course and obviously XLR cables. So that makes it very useful. Pretty much you can put anything in there. So I'll plug directly in and just make sure I get a really good level, and just sort of play along. Now, as you play along to the guitars and the drums, you can sort of change your effect settings on the Zoom so that you can sort of see which one of these modeling tones sounds the best with what you're trying to record. And that's sort of how I came up with Tube Pre. Now, there are settings on there. There's like the SVT, and there's like a Bassman, and there's other brands. Hartkey, I think, is on there. But I typically find with modeling, as far as modeling goes, I don't use it on guitars for recording. I've only used it on bass. But what I've found is that I don't particularly love the ones that are supposed to be the other amplifier, usually because I've heard the other amplifier in application, either recorded with it or played with it, and know that that's not really the way it sounds. And I've also found that for some reason, whenever they have a name and they're like a famous amp, I don't even like that one. I like the one that's just one of their settings that they designed themselves. So I picked that one. Now, Aaron Poole, he's in our band. He plays bass when we play live, and he's in another band called Secret Bones that is his music that he wrote. And he uses a small rig when we go out and play, because, the first thing that everyone tells us when we go and play these shows at clubs and whatnot is, please turn down after like the first note. Oh, please turn down, please turn down. So we try to have rigs that are, appropriate for smaller places. So he's got this little micro VR head that actually sounds really good with this little tiny cabinet. And what I was thinking of doing today, just for to experiment with it, would be to mic that cabinet and or come out of the head. So you could come directly out of the cabinet, out of the head, and you could dial in your tone that way, going directly to the Zoom. You'd have headphones on, and you would sit there and play and get the sound exactly the way you wanted it to sound. Probably replicate the live sound, as much as possible, but have something that really cuts through with the guitars. And you could also combine the signal with a speaker cabinet miking job. So that's one way to do it. You could get two signals just from coming a direct signal off the head and miking the cabinet. That is if you do not want to use the modeling. I find the modeling to sound really good. I find it to be easy, and it's noise free because you don't have to use a microphone and pick up more room tone. I'm actually in this particular room. I've worked on it to get it to sound better, and I think it sounds okay, but I don't go out of my way to add more room to this room's tone to my recordings. I try to get it as quiet as possible whenever I can to keep that noise, that signal to noise ratio, more signal and less noise. So with that in mind, I like doing the modeling because I can do it at home. I can kick my feet up and go barefoot and just plug in and have my headphones on and just take my time getting the part down. And it usually takes me a minute to lay down the bass part because my hands get really tired and I'm not like a very good bass player. But I play the bass so that I can record my own music. That's why I play all these instruments. It's not that I'm some sort of virtuoso or anything like that. I just learned how to play each instrument enough to create the sounds that I hear in my head. So it's not so much about being a great musician. It's about using the things that you have around you to express yourself in any way that you can. And if you're isolated and you don't have other people around, or you don't know anybody who wants to play on your songs, and it's exactly what you want and you know how to achieve it, then you play the bass, you play the drums, you play the guitar. It's fun. You learn a lot, and I think it helps you for when you go and work with other people again, because you have some new insight, and you might have a better understanding of what they're going through. Now that I've played bass, I would never, say some of the things that I would say to my bass player now, because I know what he's going through. I wouldn't ask him to do something maybe that I would have asked him to do before, because I would be like, oh yeah, that's actually not an easy thing to do. Or I would, or now I know maybe what more to expect, because now I've gone through trying to learn how to play bass and be melodic on bass. Because to me, that's the real strength of the bass guitar, is that it's like another melody line that you can introduce. I think about people like Paul McCartney, who play very melodic bass lines. Another person that I think of that I really like the sound of their bass and the way they play it is Youth from Killing Joke. So you take all these influences, and of course all the the great R&B players and the Wrecking Crew guys and wonderful women players out there. All of them have been inspirations, but there's just certain people where you hear them do something on the bass guitar, something like Peter Hook, that's unusual and interesting. And I think he might even play Gibsons, or maybe Hamers, but I think he used to play a Gibson of some sort. But just something unusual, something different, something interesting that you can bring to the table. And I didn't understand that the bass guitar was such a sonic frontier, and that there were so many things you can do with it that I had never considered. So that's one of the things that happens when you record your own one-man band, is you garner a new appreciation for what musicians go to in order to become good on their instrument and to make music that excites everyone. So I think it's a very important instrument, and I take it seriously. So when I wanted to buy a bass, I wanted an American-made bass, I really wanted like a Fender Precision. That was always my favorite. So I started doing a little research, and I was looking around at classified ads. And I was living in Atlanta at the time, and I saw on Craigslist this Gibson bass. And I have a Gibson Les Paul Custom from 1986, and this one was built in 1985. Maybe 83. I will have to check the serial number really quickly, see if I can see it on here. 1983. So this is in 1983. Could be wrong about that. But when I saw it, I thought it was kind of ugly, but it felt incredible. The neck on this thing is unreal, and it weighs about 15 pounds, and I was used to heavy Gibsons, so I thought that was actually impressive. Now I'm like, man, I don't know if I could take this thing out every night. It is really heavy. You could use it as a weapon if somebody gives you any trouble. You just flip this baby around, and you have like a serious weapon. Could knock somebody's head off with this thing. And it has all the right kind of wear. Like if you were trying to do a relic job, it's not quite like a relic job, but it has all the natural cool wear of a bass guitar that was out and was a real rock and roll machine, just little bit of buckle rash back here and scratches and little dings and Mars. And then here there's lots of cigarette burn stuff, he was always doing this, in between songs. It kind of created this space between the neck and the neck pocket here, and then up here there's another little cigarette thing. But this thing is amazing. It's really something else. The neck on this thing is like a freaking cutting board. So you have your mahogany body, maple neck. And I'm going to do a video on this thing because I just think it's the coolest. And it has this Tim Shaw pickup here. It's sort of angled like a Stratocaster pickup. I don't know what that's all about, but Tim Shaw is a really smart guy, so I'm sure he had a good reason. And then I've read somewhere that this was sort of the genesis for the Badass Bridge, maybe. I could be totally wrong about that, and somebody will set me straight. But this bridge is kind of cool looking too, and really neat. I think it was an early design that became, it was an innovative design that became more standardized as time went on. So anyway, this thing is really cool, and it has an in series and and a parallel setting. I usually keep it up, which I believe is the parallel setting, which gives you like a thicker, kind of like nastier, grungier, heavier tone. I like that, and then but the other one sounds good too. It's a little cleaner, a little lighter, not so much, like a little less bombastic, than the other setting, but. I typically play with a pick. I do try to mix it up. I am trying to use my fingers because I realize that there's some tonal variation you can get that way, and you play differently when you play with your fingers. But mainly I kind of drive with a pick, and I try to come up with little bass parts that stand out, that complement the song, but that also give me a little extra melody line, or I will try to mirror what I'm doing vocally to get more melody going. So I really have come to enjoy playing the bass guitar, and I understand now its significance as an instrument in a rock and roll group or in any kind of musical endeavor. So what we're going to do is I'm going to plug this baby in. So there's a couple of different ways I'm going to do this. I'm going to try miking it just for laughs and see how that comes out. I probably won't do the direct head thing because I do like the modeling that the modeling settings that I've used on the Zoom, and I'm about to show you the Zoom up close, so you'll kind of see how I set that up. But it's just another simple operation with the Zoom R24 that makes the making of a record so easy. In this case, after you've recorded your drums, after you've recorded your guitar, you're going to have your headphones on. And if you decide to do, directly plug into the Zoom and use the Zoom its modeling capabilities, then you sort of have yourself in a relaxed environment to, play along to the song. To me, I don't know why it takes the pressure off. And I've also, earlier I talked about playing takes all the way through. Like I play my drum takes all the way through. I play my guitar takes all the way through. I typically don't try to, unless, there's a separation point, I can start back in on a second verse or something. But if the guitar continues to ring out and it's one long part, and if the drums continue to ring out and it's one long part, I usually I always just play all the way through the end. I don't typically, I'm not really good at that type of editing. I don't have a lot of skill with that type of editing or experience. And I found that, as I've said before, when you're doing the one-man band thing, the thing you want to kind of avoid is sounding like, you sat in your room and pieced a bunch of stuff together that sounds sort of fake and lifeless. So that's basically what I'm trying to avoid. And my music is typically short and like a little poppy, punky, melodic type of music. And it does not rely on technical virtuosity. It relies more on melodic information. So like you might get a thrill from the song. You might get a kick from the song because of the recorded energy, and usually because of the vocal hooks. That's kind of what my music is all about. So for that type of music, I want a lot of excitement. And I think that when you're recording by yourself, you can really stamp out this excitement quickly if you're not careful, and turn it into a real drag. And I've had that happen before. I've gone back and listened to recordings, and I thought, well, this is pretty lifeless sounding. I thought it sounded so good, and now I can tell that everything was sort of tracked separately. And so that's really what I'm trying to avoid. And so what I do is I just always play the take all the way through without doing a lot of fixing, because I've noticed that once things start getting fixed a lot, you really start to beat the life out of it, and it gets very sterile. And in this age of digital recording, the way we're all kind of accustomed to doing it now, and the way the industry churns out music, that's sort of the de facto way. And I think that I'm not really into lamenting about things being not any good and used to be better. At another point, that's pretty boring. Who cares? But mainly, the one thing I will say is that I think that certain types of music really lend themselves to sort of more of an erratic presentation with lots of energy. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the most perfectly played and executed takes, but they'll be the ones that have that excitement. That's more of what I'm interested in. But everybody has different goals. Let's say you're a Berkeley or Juilliard type of grad, and that type of player, you're going to focus on something else, and you're going to make music that's going to sound exciting because you're going to know how to do what you need to do. Every artist knows what they need to do to achieve what they're trying to achieve, and none of them are better or worse than the other. They're just all different ways of doing it, different approaches depending on your taste and your background, your musical background. So with bass guitar, basically what I'm trying to do is not screw things up. I want it to sound good. I'm not the greatest bass guitar player in the world, but I'm continuing to work on my skills and try to learn more about playing the instrument and making it sound the way I want it to sound. Okay, so now I'm going to plug the bass directly in and play along to the track. And I'm going to do a close-up of the Zoom. That way you'll be able to see how I get to the effects bank and how I set that all up. And I'm going to just play along to the track with the headphones on and try to get into the groove, feel like I'm in the middle of it. I like to take my time and really start to feel like I'm playing along and just sort of sink into the experience. This will probably take several takes. I always screw the bass part up, usually because I've kind of come up with it very quickly, and I'm usually not like super aware of the part as I'm playing it. So take your time with your part, eases frustration. You end up like feeling like kicking things after like the 10th take or whatever. So anyway, I'm gonna lay this track down. Okay, so now we are ready to look at the effects. So over here in effects, we've got on off. Well, I hit the effect button. Then we come over here and you can see on off. We've got them on. The algorithm. So like I said before in the another episode, I'm using the dual mic setting. That's the algorithm. We're going to change it right now to bass, and it's going to change my voice because I'm recording, but you'll be able to see what it does. So there's stereo. There's 8Com EQ. Mastering. Clean, that would be for a guitar. Distortion, that would be for a guitar. And this is the echo bass. So this would be acoustic bass type settings. And then this one is just bass, just says bass. That's the one I typically use. Okay, now let's go down to the patch. We've got SVT, Bassman, I believe this one is. This is a heart key. This one is the Super B. This is the Sans Amp, and it's number 5 that I've been using. Tube Pre. Now, these go on and on. There's many options. There's a tack, there's a wah, there's a talk bass, there's a slap. This number 10 is the one that Aaron used. It's slap jazz, but it doesn't really sound like a slap thing. It gives you just a little more boing, and it sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the one that I use, and that is the Tube Pre. It just has a nice rich tone. That's the closest one I could find to that geezer tone. Okay, so we're here. We've got, let me move the camera over a little bit just to show you what's going on here with the Zoom. We're in one. We're armed. Our input. We've got the high Z thing on just because we're plugging in directly with an amp. With a guitar. We're plugged in, and then if we go back over here, this is our effects area. And to get out of that, I'm just going to hit exit down here. Couldn't really see it because it's out of frame. But now we're back, and you can see our running time, and you can also see some of the other things. Here's the tempo, the metronome flashing if you were to use that. You have your bounce button, your swap button, your transfer button. Here's all your readings here, so you know where you're at in the song. You can make marks. It gives you your your time, your BPM here, 4/4 time, 1 bar. It's really cool. It has like pretty much everything you would need to do musical or field recordings on it. Okay, so that's our setting. Now we're going to play the part.